Hello and welcome to the next lesson in our course. So what I want to do in this lesson, I want us to refactor our code. In other words, make our code have a bit more organization, which will allow us to have a structured code base. All right, so currently we have, and keep in mind that uh, the the code structure, the directory structure that we will ultimately end up with is the recommended way of actually structuring a Go web application. And so you might be asking, why didn't I just do that from the start? Well, I didn't want to do that from the start because I didn't want it to seem like magic and it's something you just had to accept. So by us simply writing code and then hitting an obstacle, and remember that obstacle was how do we do proper validation. And so we had to pass in all of this data to the template, but we couldn't. And so that was a perfect excuse for us to restructure or structure our code. And so we basically call that idea of structuring our code and getting rid of some redundancy refactoring. Okay, so we need to refactor our code to allow us to make the changes that we require. Now going forward, whenever you're going to build a new web application, I expect you to actually use this structure from the get-go, from the beginning. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to place our code in different directories. Okay, so currently we have all our code, and then we have our templates on HTML and so on in the UI directory. So the UI directory is correct, right? So in the UI directory, you would find things like the HTML, you would find things like the CSS, the JavaScript, and so on. So what I want to do, I want to take the handlers and the main, okay, and put them into their own directory. And so the preferred way, the preferred names is CMD web. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a directory, okay, -p. So I'm going to create a directory named MD, and inside that directory, I am going to create another one named web. And notice the -p simply tells Linux that if CMD does not exist, create it so that we can create web inside CMD. If I try to do this without the -p, it will throw an error. Okay, I'll show that to you. All right, so it tells me you can't make web because you have to first make CMD. And so to avoid that, I will just tell Linux to make the CMD for me. -p means parent. Okay, so if I do ls, I will see I have a CMD directory. And if I check what is in CMD, I will see that there's a web subdirectory. And so what I want to do, I want to take the handlers.go and the main.go, and I want to move them into the web subdirectory that we just created. So we're going to use the mv command. Mv is to cut and paste. Right. So I'm going to move handlers.go and main.go, and I'm going to move it into the cmd /web directory. And when I press enter, and I do ls, I notice that I only have go.mod, go.sum in my code box directory. Now, by moving my handlers.go and my main.go, then you'll notice that we now have a problem. Okay, so it's telling us about it can't find certain things, and that is to be expected because we have moved the code. Okay, all right. So that's okay. That's the whole point of refactoring our code. After moving the code to the relevant directories, we will have to go into the code and make changes to the code to reflect the new structure. All right, so refactoring does take time. However, it's much better in the long run. All right, so notice it's telling me that something was moved. Okay, so let's look at our handlers. And if you notice, we have this struct, this quotation struct, and we should not have that there. Okay, we need to have this in its own package, in its own directory, and then we will somehow give the handlers access to it. Okay, and so the reason why we move this is one, we want to separate the structure, the quotation, from the handlers that use it. So the handler should not have anything extra. The handler should simply be the ones where you call it and it does something. Okay, so we want to move all of this code, all of this data that the handlers depend on, and we want to move it to its own location. And the second reason why we want to do that is because we could have a lot of these type of structures which hold the data from the database. Let's say you have one for user, you have one for quote, you have one for something else. You don't want to be putting all of them inside the handlers. It will get messy pretty quickly. So that's another reason why we move it into its own location. And so let's do that. We're going to create a directory where we will place the quotation struct. So again, I'm going with convention. I'm going to make a directory. Okay, and the directory will have pkg/models. Okay, so if you notice, I have a directory named pkg package, and so what I want to do is to put all the things that are not necessarily Go code. Okay, and so we would put in here things like the structs and so on. Any code for or any doing any kind of validation for the forms would go in there. Okay, so I want us to go into pkg, and notice we have a models subdirectory. And so let me go into models. Okay, and currently models is empty. So what exactly do I place in models? Models is just a fancy way of saying the structs that we have the structure that we have created to hold the row that comes out of the database. Okay, and so in this models subdirectory, we're going to place all our structs such as quotation. So let's create a file, and this file will be named models.go. Okay, here it is. Okay. Save. All right, good. So it's gone. And so we'll place it in models.go. Okay. Now, one thing we must do whenever we have a package, and by the way, this models is a package, we have to, at the top, specify, give the package a name. Okay. And so we will simply say package, and we're going to call this package models, exactly the name as the directory it is in. So models directory, models package, so package models. Of course, we need to import the time package. All right. And let me change this name. Let's just call this quote. And let's call this the quote ID. So I'm just changing the name to reflect a bit. So let's call this created at. Notice I'm using capital letters, right? So Q, capital C, capital A, category, and let's call this the body. Okay, so this struct will hold a quote. So whenever we need to load a quote, we basically create a quote, an instance of quote. And of course, we have done this before. So another reason why, like I was saying, we have this file that will only hold models. So if I have to create a user's model to hold a user, then I would place that in here, okay, which we will do eventually. So a struct to hold a user. Okay, so I'll just leave this there because in a week or two, we will be creating a user for our web application. And so we will need a way to hold a user, to represent a user in our Go code. Because remember, you can think of this code as simply a representation in Go of the code table in our Postgres database. And so a table gets mapped, a quotation row gets mapped into an instance of this quote struct. Again, this should not be confusing you because we have worked a lot with this struct. It's just that we were doing it inside of the handler.go file. Now I'm moving it out. And so the question becomes, if I move it out, then how will the handlers, the handler functions, how will they know where to find it? And I will simply say dependency injection. And so another reason that I have a package name model is because I want to be able to export this package. I want to be able to use this package in my main files. Okay, and we'll see that. So all I've done so far is to move things out, and so all we have to do is to use dependency injection to make all of this available. Good. So I will leave it here, okay, for this first video on refactoring our code. There's a lot more to do, but I don't want to overwhelm you, and so I'll be doing it a piece at a time. Okay, so the question becomes, all right, how do we share? How do we let the handlers see this quote? All right, that's the question, and we will answer that. Now, before I cut the video, before I stop, I want to create one more directory, and this directory, okay, let me come back out, cdls. Good. This directory will be placed inside the models directory. So I'm going to go into pkg, then I'm going to go inside models. Okay, and so I have a file named models.go. Now I am going to create a directory right in here, and I'm going to call this directory PostgreSQL. Okay, so mkdir postgresql. And so what am I going to do with this PostgreSQL directory? Well, in this directory, I am going to write the code that allows me to access our database. And so a part of refactoring, if you look at handlers, a part of refactoring is I don't want to have the handlers do the SQL code inside the handler. Okay, so all of this SQL code, right? I'll insert, I'll delete, I'll update, I'll read, all of these SQL code. I want to move it out. Okay, I want to move it out. And so what I want is for the handler, for example, if I want to insert something, if I want to insert something, all the handler should do is to say insert, and it should work. Okay, I will call a function name insert, and the job will be done. All right, so we don't want to see any SQL inside our handler, inside our handler functions. All right, and so that is the purpose of this PostgreSQL directory. So if I go in here, okay, I'm going to create a file, and this file will be called quotes. Okay, .go. Okay, and so just to summarize, I have a directory named pkg. Inside this directory, I have a models directory. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So I have inside my, let me go back one, Control L. Okay, yeah. C data. Okay, so inside my PKG, I have a directory named models, and inside my models directory, I have this models.go, and then I have postgres.sql. And so I give it the specific name postgres.sql. Why is that? Well, if you think about it, what if you're working for someone and they tell you, we don't want to use PostgreSQL, we want to use MySQL. Well, because we have moved all the SQL code out of the handler, then we can breathe a sigh of relief. I don't have to go in here and change the SQL code so that it works with MySQL. Because remember, PostgreSQL, they have the syntax is a bit different than MySQL syntax. Okay? So you don't want to go back into your code, into your handlers, and change all of that. No. By having a directory named Postgres, you write all your Postgres specific SQL. And so if the day ever comes when you have to create or to make your web application work with MySQL, then it's as simple as creating a MySQL directory and putting in all the code in there. So notice your web application can easily be extended to work with different databases without your having to go in and alter the code that you have written before. Right? So if your handler, all it does is call insert, then all you have to do is to make sure that when you create your new code in MySQL, it has an insert function that actually does the work. Okay? All right, so we'll see how that works. But for now, we're going to only use PostgreSQL. However, this applies to any other DBMS that you are asked to use. All right, so we have everything we need. Oh, I have one thing missing. One thing missing. Let me close this. Okay, let's open. Okay, see the code box. Okay, let me open Visual Studio Code. Okay, so the changes have been reflected. For some reason, I was not seeing the changes. Okay, but here they are. Okay, so I have my quotes. And so what I need to do, okay, is to actually make this a package. So package PostgreSQL. Okay. And that's it. Okay. So to wrap up, models is in the models package. PostgreSQL has a file named quotes.go, which is in its own package named package PostgreSQL. So we are set. We have everything we need. And so the task really becomes, oh, there's one more thing I need to import, sorry. We'll be dealing with database, so obviously we need the database SQL, okay? But if I save it, it will disappear. So I guess I'll have to leave it until we actually start writing our code. Okay, so I have everything. And so the next step in the next video, in the next lesson, is to see how we can tie everything back together so that the handlers can actually see the things that we have moved out. All right, I'll see you then.